Greetings in the Lord. Welcome back to our continuing series on the spiritual journey. We are coming to you this evening from Vasey Theater here at Villanova University. And tonight we are going to be taking a look at the deeper symbolism involved in the Christmas season. And later on, besides the presentation, there will be an opportunity for plenty of questions and answers. And we'll be getting to that as soon as we come right back.
New from Crystal Records, The Wonder of Christmas, sung by the Daughters of St. Paul. Enjoy such Christmas favorites as O Come All Ye Faithful, Joy to the World, Do You Hear What I Hear, Silent Night, and many more. The Wonder of Christmas is available at the St. Paul Book and Media Center, 1719 Chestnut Street, in Philadelphia. Come visit us or call 215-568-2638. Share Christmas joy with those you love with quality tapes from Crystal Records.
We are all familiar with the story of Christmas. It is one of those stories that moves everyone, whether they're a little child or somebody up in years. And tonight what we'd like to do is take a look at some of the deeper symbolism involved in the Christmas story. In that sense, the historical story is really not the issue here. What I'd like to do instead is consider this whole scene here as a map, a parable for all of us to help ourselves get our spiritual bearings and understand what God's plan is for all of us. What I'd like to suggest is that this story, besides being about the birth of Jesus Christ in Nazareth, in Bethlehem, is in fact really primarily a story about the birth of Christ in our own hearts. That's what's going on here. So what I'd like to do is take a look at each of the different figures that are involved in the Christmas story. First of all, it takes place right at the end of the Advent season. And during the Advent season, this is a time for all of us to work at purifying ourselves and to make ourselves a fitting place for the birth of the Christ consciousness within us all. We know for sure that you never get that kind of mind and heart of Jesus when it comes to worldly values. The inn, in fact, that Mary and Joseph go to, and at which there is no room, is a symbol of respectability and common values. If we are to get in touch with a higher power that is found inside all of us, one of the first things we need to do is make a break with the everyday thinking of the people walking around on the street out there. We have to be willing to go beyond that. Now, where does it all take place? It takes place in very, very humble surroundings, usually in some kind of a cave or some kind of a stable. And that is a reminder to all of us that we get in touch with the higher power inside ourselves in the midst of our own inner poverty. There's a great mystery there. If we are to find the highest within us, first of all, we have to plumb the depths of the lowest inside ourselves. We need to face our own brokenness and our own inner poverty. The birth of Christ takes place in the little crib, the manger. And the word manger reminds us of the French word manger, to eat, or the Italian word mangiare. It's a symbol of the fact that here is where we get our real nourishment, when we get in touch with the power of Christ that is inside us. This then is where Christ is born, in the midst of very, very humble surroundings, the humble surroundings of our own brokenness. In other words, to get in touch with the power of Christ within, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to have it all together in any way, shape, or form. We need to discover the fact that precisely in our brokenness, we can discover the highest that is within us all. Notice that Christ is always flanked by Mary and Joseph. I wonder why. Well, besides being obviously the mother and father of Christ here on this earth, they are a symbol of the masculine and the feminine within us all. And if we are ever to attain wholeness, one of the things that we need to do is get in touch with both aspects, the masculine and the feminine. The masculine stands for the firm, the direct, the aspiring, and the objective. And remember, this isn't something that just men have, obviously, because we all have a mixture of the masculine and the feminine within us. The feminine stands for the open, the caring, and the tender, the experiential, and the intuitive part of ourselves. And I think what this suggests is that before Christ consciousness can be born in our heart, we have to have a balance between the feminine and the masculine. Both are absolutely necessary for us on our pursuit of wholeness. Usually there is also an angel that is present in the crib scene. The angel is a symbol of the fact that there are positive energies from the other side that are assisting us on our journey. In other words, we don't have to attain Christ consciousness only by willpower. We don't have to just decide that we, in fact, are going to attain this. You can't, in fact, storm the gates of heaven this way. But we can be assisted by those angelic presences that are there on the other side. It's a reminder to us also that we are assisted by the spirit world. All those who have gone before us are praying for us. Sometimes we get the impression that on our own journey it's just up to us. And we forget the fact that we are constantly surrounded by spirits. Obviously we can't see them and can't always feel them or be aware of them, but they're there. And that angel then is a reminder to all of us that we're not alone on this journey within. We also notice that there are shepherds who are present. And the shepherds stand for those who are willing to change their lives and are willing to change their values to follow the higher call. They are working in their fields, but when they are called by that higher power, what they do is they drop everything. And that's a reminder to all of us that we never get anywhere if we think that we can just continue on with business as usual. If we are to grow spiritually, what we need to do is let go of any of the things that are holding us back in our pursuit of the highest that is within us all. And so there are many other figures that we have to look at here. The wise men, the Madonna figure herself, the animals, and we're going to be getting back to all of those figures and touching on them as soon as we come right back from this short message.
The House of Charity can be found at work throughout South Jersey, wherever there is suffering and distress. Through its agencies, compassionate care goes to the elderly. The needy receive food and clothing. Special education programs administer to the mentally handicapped. Expectant mothers receive pre- and postnatal care. and medical services are rendered to the ill. Support the House of Charity in South Jersey. Touch someone's life with love.
Oh, I haven't seen this in years.
Grandma, who's that? Is that great-grandpa and grandma?
Yes, it is. And that's Ellis Island. Your great-grandparents worked very hard to get there.
Why'd they come here?
Well, like many immigrants, they wanted to fulfill their beliefs and dreams.
About God?
About many things, especially God.
Religious freedom. A message from your Catholic neighbors.
Excuse me. I want to give blood.
You're in the right place. Come with me.
I heard about those people in the accident. I just want to help.
Great.
How are they doing anyway?
Well, last we heard, they're going to be just fine.
You know, it's a good thing you guys were there.
No. It's a good thing you are here.
Call the American Red Cross. Your neighbors need you.
And then we have the wise men, or as one of the kids in the grammar school referred to them one day, the three wise guys. They represent people who are learned in the spiritual search. Magi is the plural of magus, that means a magician. So the three magi then were people who were students of the spiritual sciences. They were astrologers. They were the ones who understood the deeper meaning of things. But it's interesting that they come and they kneel before the Christ child. And there's a very important point there. And that is that worldly wisdom, logic, rational concerns are important. But in the final analysis, they all have to get down on their knees before the great mystery of love. So these magi then represent the highest in terms of rational thinking, but they also make the point that rational thinking is as nothing compared to the experience of the living God. They bring three gifts with them. One gift is that of gold. Gold is a symbol of wholeness. Perhaps you have heard of the medieval alchemists. They were the people who, on a literal level, were engaged in trying to produce gold by the combination of various metals. However, there was a deeper meaning to what they were all interested in, and that was that what they were really trying to do was to find out what combination of the psychic elements inside us is necessary to produce wholeness. And so gold then becomes a symbol of the fact that we need to come to God, come to Christ, accepting ourselves with all of the various energies that are inside ourselves. We need to combine them in a marvelous synthesis and not be selective about just identifying with certain energies that we have inside ourselves. They also bring the gift of frankincense, that is a symbol of prayer. Because as that incense rises up, that's a reminder to all of us that the only way we find God is when we lift up our minds and hearts. We need to go into prayer every day to discover God. You don't just find God walking down the street. You have to look for God in the cave of your heart. You need to move away from rational thinking in a prayerful frame of mind, and there, in the stillness of the heart, discover the living God. There's also the gift of myrrh. That's the one we probably know the least about. Myrrh was one of those spices that was used, interestingly enough, for burial. So what could the meaning of that possibly be? That's a reminder to all of us that the only way we really find the Christ within is after we have gone through a kind of a death of the ego. Not that we want to destroy the ego, but it needs to be transformed. But when we're going through a spiritual crisis, when we are trying to surrender rational thinking, and this ego's penchant for holding on to control of things, the fact of the matter is, it does feel just like a death. Many people can point to a certain time in their life when the old person died and the new person, the Christ within, began to come alive inside themselves. And then, of course, we have that very important figure of the Madonna. Mary is not the Christ. She doesn't claim to be. What she is a channel for the Christ. She is the womb of God. She is the let it be woman. She becomes the clear symbol to all of us that the way we discover the God within is to not pretend that we are Christ, not to pretend that we are perfect, but to realize that paradoxically enough, we can still give birth to that higher consciousness. When we surrender our own limited will, when we allow the ego to get out of the way, God can be born from inside of us too. Mary then becomes the perfect symbol, I think, for the Christian, along with John the Baptist, because neither of them were having an identity crisis. Neither one of them claimed to be Christ, but yet they were very much aware of the fact that they could point to Christ, and in Mary's case, give birth to Christ. So she becomes a symbol of the feminine within us all, the intuitive part of ourselves, that is the pathway to the divine. Women seem to come in touch with this feminine part of themselves easier than men do. I guess that's natural. But men have to find it sometimes with a little more work. They have to discover that they need to let go of their rational control. They need to surrender. They need to be like Mary and say, let it be. Let it be. And then we have the symbol of the star. That is a reminder to all of us that we are being given divine guidance. Sometimes on our spiritual path, we may tend to think that it's all us, and we're not being given any messages along the way. It's almost as if God has set the whole thing in motion, and now it's up to us. But it doesn't work that way. There are signs all the time for those of us who are wise enough to tune in and find those signs. For example, for myself, one of the ways I find that is through my dream interpretation every night. I've become aware of the fact that God is a reality and God is speaking to me every night. So the divine guidance is there. And that star then becomes a symbol of the fact that we're not alone. There is a higher power that is bringing all of us to wholeness. And all we need to do is not feel that the whole thing depends on us, but we need to just get out of the way and allow Christ to be born within us. And interestingly enough, there are always the animals who are present. What creche scene would be complete without the animals? And I think that's a reminder to all of us, too, that the animal part of ourselves has a place. Sometimes people who are on the spiritual path feel that this part of themselves somehow has to be suppressed. Instead, we need to get in touch with those animal instincts and consecrate them to Christ, not eliminate them. They always have a place in the creche scene, and they have a place in our pursuit of wholeness. So perhaps the next time we look at the creche scene, we'll notice that there is a lot more there than meets the eye. And when we come back, we're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers about some of the deeper meaning of the Christmas scene. See you shortly.
From the river to the ocean and everywhere in between, the Diocese of Trenton lives in its parishes, people, homes, and schools. And the Monitor newspaper is your way to keep aware of the renewal of the diocese. Lively features, accurate news reports, and columnists with something to say. Read the Monitor to find out what's happening in your church, from around the world, throughout the diocese, in your parish, from the ocean to the river. To subscribe, call area code 609-586-7400.
A long time ago, I had an abortion. At the time, I thought it was the only answer, the only solution. Then I woke up one morning with this incredible emptiness, and I started to cry, and I couldn't stop. You see, I never really dealt with the reality of my loss. Project Rachel helped me to realize God's love for me and allowed me to find forgiveness in His church and in myself.
If you need help, call Project Rachel at 609-546-8945.
Okay, everyone, let's see if we have some questions. Yes?
Yeah, your thing about the guidance star and you use your dream interpretation, can you explain more about that?
Well, I think that sometimes we get this feeling that we are alone in the universe. But one of the things that we become convinced of as we move along the journey of the Spirit is that it's not just us in pursuit of God. It's at least equally as much God in pursuit of us. We begin to discover that there is, in fact, a higher power that is moving the universe. And we begin to discover that there are no coincidences in our lives. That's one of the words that you can throw out of your spiritual vocabulary, coincidence. We have this idea that things just happen by chance. I think especially as we get older and we look back, we realize that everything is unfolding according to a plan. Now, while we're going through something like that, of course, we don't often see it. And we might tend to think, well, this is the one exception to the rule because what's happening to me in my life right now doesn't make any sense at all. But later on, we look back and we say, oh yeah, the hand of God was there. And I think that star then is a reminder to us that in our pursuit of wholeness, we are being guided and attracted by that higher power at all times. I mentioned dreams as one example of getting in touch with that higher power. People find it in other ways too. By the people who come into their lives, they realize this person, this spouse, this friend was sent to me by God. There's no coincidence here. This person obviously was sent into my life for a purpose. We start seeing all these things happening more and more to the point where we begin to see the hand of God everywhere. And I think the star then is that reminder to us about the higher power that is always active in our lives. Yes, ma'am.
Father, this is a whole new concept that I have never heard before, and it gives a deeper meaning to Christmas.
Good.
I have no question, but I just am enthralled by it.
Okay, thank you. And what this does, I think, in no way takes away from the power of the literal story itself. Little children who are 5 years of age can get into this story just as much as we ourselves who perhaps now have a deeper understanding of things. But one of the things we begin to see that even when it comes to the scripture stories, there are no coincidences. Everything begins to fit together, and that higher power begins to manifest itself all the time. And I think one of the things that has happened perhaps over the centuries is that we have become so fixated on the externals of things that we have forgotten that everything has a deeper and a hidden meaning. And it's a shame because in pursuit of deeper meaning in things, people are oftentimes leaving the church. They're going to the East, they're getting involved in all sorts of cults and everything. And I think what we really need to do is just make our tradition that is incredibly rich come alive. It's all there. Like, this is just a simple little story. As you mentioned, you've never heard this before. But it's always been there, but I guess for some reason we've been out of touch with it. And I think these are really exciting times that we're living in right now when we're beginning to get in touch with the deeper meaning of all these different stories. Thanks very much for your comment. Yes?
You mentioned the animals representing the animal in us. Could you dwell on that a little bit? Is that a good part or a bad part of us, or what does that really mean?
It's a good part of us, and it's a necessary part of us. Sometimes spiritual journeyers will think that to become spiritual, this means that they somehow have to deny the legitimate needs of the body. And they perhaps begin to punish their own body and think that their body is unworthy, because after all, what they're trying to become is spiritual. But we discover after a while that this is an integral part of ourselves, and it is our pathway to God. We cannot get to God except through our own bodies. The ancient Egyptians had a marvelous symbol of that, and that was the Sphinx, that had the body of a lion, the head of a human, and the wings of an eagle. That was a reminder to all the people that we have a threefold nature. We are at the same time animals, humans, and gods. And what we need to do as human beings is learn to accept and coordinate all those aspects. If you try to act as if you have no animal needs, or no human needs, or no divine needs, sooner or later you can bank on the fact that you're going to get in trouble. So it is no more important or no less important than the mental and the spiritual. It is part of God's plan. For some reason, He has created us with bodies. He has put us in the flesh. And if we have any objections to that, we can take it up with a higher authority. But for some reason, God wants us to be in our bodies, and therefore we have to respect our bodies as temples of the Holy Spirit. Well, I think tonight then really has been an opportunity for us to get a whole different light on this particular feast day, and hopefully the next time we celebrate Christmas it will be with a deeper understanding of some of the real symbolism that is involved. And we're also going to get in touch with other feast days as we move along on our spiritual journey. We'll talk about the symbolism of Easter and lots of twists and turns of the spiritual path. If you have enjoyed what we have done here tonight, perhaps you'd consider dropping us a line. The address is Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA, 19103. You've been a marvelous audience. I thank you for being here. Good night, everyone.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen Travel of Media, PA. Phone area 215-565-7070.